watching these buoys bobbing up and down out in the water on the coast. Coast Guard in action. Thinking what play is there? One of being slow. Having no rise, though that's why they sit out there, trying to protect seeking the rise and the swell, but ultimately they push it down, breaking it apart, not knowing what they're a part of, not even knowing really how to surf. Looking for little bits of action here and there, a sense of stimulus to keep them sitting down and floating. But, oh man, watch out, because there's something that no one can ride. We gotta level it out. We gotta push it down so that we can coast. Because what is there for any of us if there's one who's for none of us? So let's guard the coast. Be some little bobbing buoys out here thinking that we're doing what we think we're doing. Sitting down, coasting. Well, I'll show you the real coast. And it's a cost that none of you can imagine. Because you're all fake before me. Like talking about another's driving when you don't even know what driving is, and you say that they can't drive. But the fact of the matter is that you're not allowing them to drive because you're saying that they can't. Being not from this place, but drawn here by the coast. The coast then saying, oh, you're not here to dry. You're not here to be dry. You're here to be wet. And you're here to play and have fun and do all these fun things on the coast. Drawn in for its wet and wild waters and its waves. But then ultimately said that they can't drive. Well, truly, how can I drive when what's keeping me here is driving me away from being dry? Which then ultimately I stand upon this precipice and throw out a wave that none of you can catch. And as my torn and mangled mess of scrap heaps up upon this mountaintop, overviewing all of this which I know I can contain, and I can bolt up and package it up in many different forms and call it land, even though it's sea. And hoist it up and dump it out and mix it and mangle it up into something else. I will do the same here with this mess that you've made of what I've done. And as it crashed down, what it'll ultimately crash down into is something that is so torn up, so mangled, such a mess that it's beyond even your perception. So sit out there coasting, relishing in your waves and your rises and your peaks and your troughs, which allows you to sit out there and coast just with a little bit of the stimulus, but then ultimately guarding the coast, because then if there's so much of what it is that you're after, then you can't remain out there coasting. And I'm here to build up just that. Just what it is that you're after, but none of you can have. As I ponder as to whether or not to make things harder. I know that I could. But at what point in time does truly doing so make things crumble rather than solidify? Tough, though, when thinking about such a thing. For should I not be able to make it more difficult to make it last and have a more profound impact? Because is that not what it took to get it to stand? So why should it be any different that the laws it follows should change as I continually try to erect its structure? Whereas then in being possessed towards making a thing last, what happens but it withers away? Wherefore, though, why is it so that that's how it began? And now it says no more. Is it the change? Is the change too abrupt? For it was a spike, a dramatic drop and rise and climb. An introduction, I dare say. Wherefore an introduction means that there was something that was come across. And what does it mean to come across but to be surprised, perchance, by what it is that you've stumbled upon as you are then introduced to a thing? And if it is something pleasing, the introduction becomes something that has a lasting nature. Wherefore, though, once the thing introduced to becomes overbearing, and the landscape from which you came in contact with the party involved continually arouses change, which is what the introduction itself was. Pleasant at first, but then the change becomes so dramatic, so abrupt, so chaotic, such a massive amount of movement that its presence is no longer wanted. The introduction turns into an endeavor to rid a treaty, to ultimately disband the party from your premises, from the point of introduction, from the intersection, and to say, leave, be gone. We were introduced, but you may not stand. Your presence is no longer wanted. But it was wanted because of the dramatic spike, and that's why it rose in the first place. That massive change, which was a newness, a fondness, a character unknown, now standing before you. But now so known that you know not where you are anymore, as this character has then moved massive amounts of what you thought the place was where you were. And I know what it's like to walk around through a jungle. Some perceive this place as having no sense of orientation. But trust me, as I weave my way through the woods, I know a stick or two when I see it. When this is the place that I've been for so long. Oh, and how happy I was when I came across some individuals walking amongst the same neck of the woods that I was. And this introduction took a hold of me. It was that dramatic change of the space of the place which gave rise to a feeling and emotion. But then when emotions created turmoil, and those sticks that some would call a tangled up mess through a madness were then moved. And when I went back, I said, where are those sticks? Where's that growth that was there? A rock even that I came across and noticed that it had been tread upon and kicked aside and tumbled over. And there were now tracks leading up to a place in which my light feet never tread hard enough to even create a footprint. And now I can no longer walk up and see the growth of things which entranced my vision through a sparkling aspect. One in which I needed nothing in that moment but to see the land itself grow and to entice me with little treats and treasures. But now those rocks are moved and they're kicked aside and they're crumbling and falling apart. And as I was introduced in this place, I thought the same. Though when I came about it, I thought, hey, I'll come about it in a way in which my goings on are known about before they go on. But even still, what happened, what took place, was only sadness, and maybe that's all a relationship is. There was a dramatic spike, that introduction of awareness, of coming across, of conversation even, of newness. But then things became old in their state of disruption, possibly even monotony at times. which then the same sensation which brought about the introduction in the first place, the rise, was now ultimately devastating towards the structure which took hold. And then therefore I see that crumbling aspect written out in the nature of language, which culminates characters into a form of understanding. One which allows me to look upon a place, perhaps one in which I feel as though I could continue, but the continuance is a leaving, actually. The continuance, even a foot away, is a total rebuilding, a demolition of where something is, so minute, but with it, a resurgence of all that it took to put it where it was now. And that's how I'll leave it. As I still contemplate the erection of that structure, the pillar, an amalgamation of parts, I think to myself, how could something stand for so long in a place such as this? Unless there was a hive mindset at work to get something to work together in such a way that it could stand strong. But in so doing and becoming a part of that motion, the structure loses purpose to me. As then it must have purpose, for why else would the hive get together in such a way to construct such a thing? So then therefore I stand as my thing withers away, thinking about all those little balls of sand that I've made over the years, and what purpose did they actually serve? Digging up that mud and clay, tossing it back and forth between two palms until such a sphere is shown before me, rolling it around in some little tiny rocks to give it an outer coating. I sat there and did this while beautiful music played, far off from my ears, though so near and dear. And then I'd scoop out a little bit inside of the earth, so that way when I placed this ball in the ground, to let it solidify for when I showed up and arrived next week, its form held shape and didn't slouch as I gave it compression within the soil. And then I think about the structure that I've been trying to cause to stand over the last little while, whereas then something so meaningful, though like I said, will lose meaning because for it to stand in such a place, it must have meaning, which is when there it is then lost. For in this, what I mean is that why would such a structure be built in such a place that would cause a stir up and rise in the civilization at hand? For it to put its hands together, to then come together and to work together, which would then ultimately let it stand. But then in doing so, this thing must serve a purpose beyond just being something that doesn't have to serve a purpose. Which is then where it loses purpose and it loses the ability to be something actually meaningful. And so then I stand there on the precipice with these rocks stacked and this pillar toppling, thinking to myself, why do I want this to stand longer? I already got a good picture of something that I felt good about, but then came back and tried to make more of it. Why did I go back? If I pile up more and more around this structure, will it ultimately then just collapse beneath its own weight, as then my purpose becomes the purpose of what it would take to culminate a conglomerate of people to actually build something, which then loses its purpose to me, because then the structure that I have to erect for it to be able to stand has to be one in which has none of that true meaning, but is only structurally something. Able to stand, but standing for nothing. Only arrogance, antagonism, cynicism, contrast. A fight, perhaps. But then how far have I strayed from those little spheres in which I so dearly love to make, and then they would just crumble away. Should I erect a pillar of war? Is that what this is? And as its central core erodes away, as though a volcanic pit has arisen in its place, as these rocks hewn instead of earth and clay. But then what more will I seek upon this structure's crumbling? And what ugliness will I have to overcome to find some sense of a good photo? And having it be sound while walking along the edge of drowning in happenstance and purpose, invasion and movement and change. When ultimately it means nothing to me at all. Then what am I doing but trying to create meaning when nothing means anything to me? Who then is this for but myself? And then I try to make it for others. But there is no appreciation. Maybe there is, but I have to disregard it. To continue on in such a way, on the borderline of making everything so meaningful, meaningless, while still striving for meaning that I may continue on towards culmination of things and parts and pieces putting them together towards something which then gives me a sensation. But then taking away the sensation as soon as I've had it so that it doesn't tear me apart.